Hi, I'm Dayna, and I'm here with your divination for the new moon solar eclipse in sidereal Virgo. The 2025 Sidereal Astrology Guide says, proving and disproving suspicions. Break down. If you can't hold it, let it hold you. Let it carry you. When you've done all that you know to do. There's a lot of things that I need to talk about today, and they're kind of scrambled all up in my brain, but hopefully they will come out in a way that makes sense to y'all. I don't need to tell you it's eclipse season. In Divination for Liberation Sidereal Astrology, eclipses are to be understood as marking and naming major cultural shifts. Eclipses create a type of container, which is like a larger plot or larger series of changes and shifts that we are all experiencing collectively and that impacts us in similar and different ways, usually which we can understand based on our birth chart or just through some analysis and understanding of what it is that these major shifts are about. This particular eclipse series, which is in sidereal Pisces and Virgo, began October 2023. And for anybody who pays attention to anything in the world would know that that absolutely marked a moment of a major cultural shift, where after over 70 plus years of propaganda, lies, genocide, and a one-sided war against Palestinians, the tide began to change in the collective narrative and understanding of what was happening between Israel and Palestine. And a lot of this is because of technology. In October of 2023, we were able to see in real time first person accounts of Palestinians in Gaza and the violence that they were experiencing at the hands of Israel's. Had we seen on social media first person accounts before? Yes. But the difference was that this was post 2020. And in 2020, our capacity to make room for experiences that disrupted our belief systems, that countered propaganda narratives, and that made room for us to change our belief system, we were primed at that moment for this. That one of the ways that I understand why 2020 was the way that it was with the George Floyd protest and this moment where it seemed that the power dynamics of race were shifting in favor of something more equitable and honest. But the reason why I believe that it appeared that way or that it happened is because so much of our society is about these hierarchies of survival. And these hierarchies of survival are about a certain group of people wanting to create distance between themselves and death and using other groups of people to shield them from death. So capitalists hoard all the land and resources and wealth and exploit the labor and put the laborers or the workers in closer proximity to death. Whether that is exposure to the elements, environmental toxins, using the police for capitalists to protect their private property, um, these are all ways that capitalists put the rest of us in closer proximity to death. They have access to the treatments and drugs. And I mean, just think about the AIDS and HIV epidemic. The rich, wealthy celebrities were flying to Europe and Israel to get these experimental treatments and medicines to try to fix and treat what they thought was going on with HIV. And the poor folks, um, in particularly Black and Hispanic neighborhoods were left to die because capital and hoarding of resources is a way for a certain group of people to put distance between themselves and death. The same thing happened with COVID. Some people were able to stay home and to teach their children while others were called frontline workers. And the front line, like, really understand and listen to that language. Front line means that there is a threat, there's a war, there is a battle, there is something that is of danger to us. And if you're on the front line, that means you are the first exposed, you are the first in line to die. And so what happened in 2020 is that there was a threat that was bigger than the threat of racism. There was a threat that was bigger than whatever perceived threat capitalists think that they are subject to. And that's why they got to hoard all of the money, right? COVID was a threat that I'm not going to say it was equally distributed, because we know that, once again, if you were on the front line, if you were Hispanic, if you were Black, you were more likely to be exposed because you couldn't stay home. But in general, particularly for people who identify as the middle class, all of these fabricated hierarchies of survival, like race and gender and ethnicity and nationality, the threat of COVID did not respect race. It did not respect gender. It did not respect nationality. Now, of course, we know that 5 years later, women are more likely to experience post-COVID symptoms long term, like long COVID impacts to their menstrual cycle, brain fog, ME, POTS, and things like that. But that's just the same way that women are more likely to suffer from autoimmune diseases. Autoimmunity is just what misogyny and patriarchy does to the body, right? Like, like, let's just tell the truth about that. But I say all of that to say that when there was a threat that, at least in theory, was bigger than the fabricated threats, that was really a time where we could kind of question the social contracts that put us in these hierarchies in the first place. A lot of people were at home, their routines were disrupted. And so we had this moment in 2020 where, when George Floyd was murdered, all of the things that would normally distract us were not there. And so we were able to really see what was going on. It is so important to understand this eclipse series within the context of October 2023 in this current round of genocide of Palestinians at the hands of Israelis. And it's important to understand this eclipse series within the context of 2020 and the way that the things that happened in 2020, particularly the George Floyd murder and subsequent uprising, set us up so that when 2023 came and we were seeing video posted by Gaza, lives in real time, we were primed to have our belief systems changed. We were primed to question our assumptions. And that's really what this whole eclipse series has been about, this eclipse series in Pisces and Virgo. September 21st, 2025 is the last eclipse in this series, and it is the third in this series, which is a new moon solar eclipse in Virgo. Let's spend some time talking about Virgo. It's not a sign I talk about a lot, but let's spend some time talking about sidereal Virgo. Sidereal Virgo is one of four mutable signs. The mutable signs are Virgo, Pisces, Sagittarius, and Gemini. The task of mutable says, how do I know what I know? The goal is self-trust. And each of the four mutable signs is using a different tool in order to draw a conclusion about what something is, or to come into knowledge, awareness, or understanding of what something is. Virgo is using the tool of earth, which is realism. Both Pisces and Virgo, which is the two signs of this eclipse series that we're wrapping up, have to do with protecting ourselves from being lied to. Just taking that piece of information right there. Can you go back to 2023 and understand why the major cultural shift, that theme, has been, how do we protect ourselves from being lied to? In the, explosion of AI being imposed upon us, and Trump, last week sharing a video from the Oval Office that was clearly AI manipulated, sharing photos that have clearly been manipulated with AI. In this moment, after the murder of Charlie Kirk, and all of these narratives that are defying what actually would make sense, that are obviously lies. Can you see that since 2023, this major cultural shift around how do you protect yourself from being lied to? Well, the way that Virgo does that is with meticulousness. Meticulous means keeping receipts. It means recording so that you could play back exactly what was said and what was heard, right? It means looking for discrepancies that illuminate contradictions between what somebody said yesterday and what they're saying today, or the discrepancies between what Charlie Kirk said when he was alive and what people are saying he said in his death. I mean, it's so fascinating in this moment to just be, a week out from this last eclipse I'm recording this on September 15th. So technically we are a week out from this eclipse at the moment of this recording, but to be a week out from this eclipse and to be subject to such incredible lying that I think most people's go-to method for these types of moments is to point out hypocrisy, which would be Sagittarius, and Virgo as well. Virgo wants to point out the discrepancies, and this idea that if you point out the discrepancies, it is going to make people say, you got me. I was lying. In fact, what they're choosing to do at this moment is that if you tell the truth, if you point out the discrepancies, what's actually going to happen is that, hold on, let me fix this. What's actually going to happen is that you're going to lose your job and people are going to threaten you with violence. So answer this question or think about this question. Why is it such a threat to have lies pointed out? Why is it such a threat? I mean, anybody who was raised by a narcissist or who has been in some type of relationship or community with a narcissist understands that like receipts and facts have no bearing on whether that person acknowledges the truth. And actually, the more that you present facts, the more that you point out the discrepancies and you bring up facts, the more violent they get because they know that you're telling the truth, first of all. And I'm using the term narcissist here very loosely in this sense of like whiteness and white power is narcissist. Do you get what I'm saying? Because if you turn a mirror onto whiteness to show whiteness what it really is, whiteness doesn't look at the mirror and be like, oh, wow, I see myself for the first time. That's really how violent I am. Whiteness punches the mirror, takes the shards and stabs the person that's holding the mirror. Like that's really what we're dealing with right now. So Virgo, at this new moon solar eclipse, we are proving and disproving suspicions. There are a lot of suspicions that have been collectively accumulating, especially over the past, 2 years since this eclipse series began. The suspicions have been accumulating because there are contradictions. There are contradictions. One of the most fascinating things for me over this past week has been that back in November, I wrote and published what I'm calling my prophetic word for the year. I've been doing this since like 2020, where I sit down after I finish the whole sidereal astrology guide for the next year, and I kind of sit with spirit and think and meditate on what is the most important thing that I have to say about the next year. And so back in the fall of 2024, when I was doing the same process for 2025, the words that came to me was 2025 crises, cults, and contradictions. And I've been doing this work for a while. I didn't come up with the name The People's Oracle because I thought it was a cute brand name, even though it's very clever. But it was something that I wanted to live up to. The People's Oracle was aspirational for me. And it's in moments like now where I'm bearing witness to our collective experience And I'm measuring it against this language I've been given to name this collective experience. And I'm like, wow, yeah, no, 2025 crises, cults, and contradiction. The piece I wrote titled 2025 Crises, Cults, and Contradictions is pinned at thepeoplesoracle.com. I talk about how there are moments when a confluence of crises completely upsets the assumptions that we've held as a society about who we are. And it makes the way that we've understood ourselves exist in glaring contradiction with the reality and experience we have now. Every time you hear somebody say, "This is not who we are," what you're witnessing is someone having encountered an irreconcilable contradiction between what the present reality tells them about themselves and the story and indoctrination they've believed about who they are. And usually, rather than taking that information in and allowing it to change and challenge the indoctrination, they reject it outright. But at this eclipse and in this eclipse series, when we're talking about Virgo, Virgo is not down with that. Virgo is not down with the whole trying to protect someone's self image or to make them feel good about themselves and then, you know, to lie and say that, ah, yes, this is not true, this unsavory thing is this is not who you really are. You're better than that. That's not Virgo, which is why people who have sidereal Virgo, people often have very extreme responses to people who have sidereal Virgo. Because sidereal Virgo placements, that's rising, that's moon, that's Mercury, that's sun, they are realist in the sense that when they encounter a discrepancy between what they're witnessing with their own senses and what they're being told or what they've been taught to believe, they're not going to back down and lean into the indoctrination, even if it leaves someone feeling disrespected, even if it leaves someone feeling invalidated. I think there's a time and a place for that, and there's a time and a place for that right now. Now, in general, there can be a time when it's not the place for that. And protecting someone's right to feel respected and seeing how they see themselves is more important than, you know, Virgos feeling that they're being lied to. Even if you don't have sidereal Virgo placements, what this moment is really about is for you to ask yourself this question. What do you do when you encounter an irreconcilable contradiction? What do you do when you come across a discrepancy where there is competing, how do I say that? When you have two sets of facts that are in contradiction with each other, how do you reconcile that? Virgo wants to get down to the minutia. That's why the gift of sidereal Virgo is meticulousness. They're going to go line by line and be like, okay, well, he said, and then he also said, but then he did. And then on February 13th, 1992, and then on October 16th, 2023, right? Virgo's going to be meticulous and go line by line down the minutia to try to find where did the math get messed up. Now, the thing about this particular eclipse is that we have sun and moon, right? Together because that's at a new moon. Mercury is also in Virgo. What did I write in the guide about that? Speaking and listening meticulously. That makes sense, right? But the point I want to get to is that this particular new moon is exactly opposite Saturn in Pisces. Remember, Saturn has been in Pisces since March 31st, 2025. And that was the first time that Saturn had been in Pisces since 1997-98. And in this particular time and season of Saturn in Pisces, we are connecting the dots that shape reality. If Virgo measures the physical evidence that forms reality, right? If Saturn in Virgo does that, Saturn in Pisces connects the dots that shapes reality. This particular story, which is really about the sun opposite Saturn, but also Mercury opposite Saturn. We're going to focus on sun opposite Saturn for right now. Goes all the way back. Oh, I had these dates written down. Shoot. Hold on. Let me see if I can pull them up. Okay. The conjunction of Sun and Saturn was at the full moon lunar eclipse in sidereal Leo on March 11th. So between the 11th and 14th of March. And then the opening square between Sun and Saturn was at the new moon in Gemini, which was, I want to say, late July. No, it would have been early July. Late June, early July, yes. And now we're at the opposition between the Sun and Saturn, which is happening, building right now. It's on the same day as the eclipse. So just in your own life, you can think about if those dates have any significance for you, particularly in this story where you are being challenged to question your own assumptions and to change your belief systems, to let new information in with discretion in a way that changes what you believe, opening yourself up to new information in a way that either reinforces what you already know and believe to be true or challenges that. I mean, I think the main theme of this eclipse series is going to be, or is the main theme of this eclipse series that we're wrapping up, is reorganizing our personal and collective hierarchies of trust. I repeat these things over and over and over again on this podcast, on my lives, in my content. And it never stops being true. I mean, we literally have the biggest vaccine skeptic as the head of Health and Human Services. How's that for a hierarchy of trust? How is that for a hierarchy of trust? So much of the reorganization of our collective hierarchies of trust have required us to change our relationship with our self-trust. Self-trust means to know what faculty to rely upon in order to discern the truth. What I talk about in that post, 2025 Crises, Cults, and Contradictions, is that so much of how our society is structured, and I think the function of a society in general, is that we outsource judgment forming to institutions, to authority figures, and to experts. That's the ideal. So we have academia and we have the rigor of research and methods and metrics. We have the scientific method. We have clergy who go through their own process of learning and being vetted. We have licensure and certificates that validate someone's knowledge and expertise and their authority to speak on a subject or to practice medicine or therapy or cut your brain open, right? But if we're reorganizing our collective hierarchies of trust, there is suspicion that emerges in these institutions, in these methods of validating, in these systems of, you know, giving people licenses in academia. I mean, if you can get fired for telling the truth, if you can get fired from your tenure track position for telling the truth, what does it mean to be tenure track? Who gets to be tenure track? Is it people who have proven the rigor and expertise in their capacity to research and speak authoritatively on a topic because they've studied and studied and studied? Or is a tenured professor a person who Donald Trump believes in? This is why this is what eclipse series do. They are major cultural shifts. Even in our global hierarchies of trust as it has to do with economies and political systems, America used to be the place that people sent their students to learn and become doctors, right? America used to be the place that people went because, we had vaccine policy that meant we didn't have smallpox and pertussis spreading around all willy nilly. I'm going to wrap up this session because I need to pull up some cards. But I just want to say that as we move through this final eclipse where we're proving and disproving suspicions, I want to say that the line of demarcation when it comes to a sanity that is socially determined and a sanity that is the consequence of a sober encounter with material reality was COVID. If you are still taking COVID seriously, that means acknowledging the reality that it exists, seeing it as a possibility when you get sick, and hopefully taking some type of precaution to protect yourself or others from COVID, you are living in a completely different reality than the rest of the world, than the rest of America, than the rest of the West. And when we look at the way that people are reacting to Trump, when we look at the way that people are reacting to the murder of Charlie Kirk, there is a straight line from whether you believed that masks could protect you from COVID to how you feel about Charlie Kirk's death. There's a straight line here. There's a straight line from, did you believe Biden when he lied to you in 2021 and told you that COVID was over? Did you believe, the CDC when they lied to you and told you that you didn't need to wear a mask anymore if you got vaccinated? If you believed those lies, you were groomed. I mean, let's really talk about what's going on here. The reason why we're culminating at this eclipse series with proving and disproving suspicions is because we have been swimming in a sea of lies that makes it almost impossible to know who to trust and to know what's real. The lies and propaganda were so effective that people don't even consider the possibility that they have COVID when they get sick. That's how effective the lies were. So this eclipse is trying to arm you with a meticulousness to recognize discrepancies and contradictions in a way that demands people make an accounting for the truth. Whether that's the people in your life, whether that's you to yourself. I mean, let's get into that. Let's not, because I'm about to pull some cards, but I'll leave it there. All right, we're back with some tarot cards to give us some insight, guidance, and wisdom for navigating the end of this eclipse season and the end of this eclipse series. Our next eclipse season will be in February and March of 2026. But for now, we are proving and disproving suspicions at this new moon solar eclipse in sidereal Virgo. First up, we've got the Nine of Pentacles. I remember this card coming up. It might have been at that full moon lunar eclipse in Leo on like March 14th. Or it might have been at the full moon in Scorpio back in June, one of the two. But I remember this card coming up, and I specifically said about this card, you have enough evidence. You do not need to go out and collect more data in order to be sure. You have enough evidence. So I think that is really poignant at this particular new moon in Virgo opposed Saturn in Pisces, particularly because we've got Jupiter in Gemini, we've got Mercury in Virgo, Sun in Virgo, Moon in Virgo, a very, very mercurial sky. And Gemini and Virgo tend to be people and collective moments where we have an insatiable appetite for information, where it makes us open to learning and to understand by learning more, but it also amplifies the distrust in ourselves that makes us feel like somebody always knows better. I think there's no place that this is more evident than with how people use AI. People go and ask ChatGPT the most inane and unnecessary questions because their capacity to trust themselves is completely undermined right now. And I also think this Nine of Pentacles is speaking to this other piece of when you are focused on pointing out lies merely by highlighting discrepancies, hypocrisy, uh, asking other people's opinion, asking ChatGPT, it causes us to shut out other sources of wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and insight. And as a matter of fact, it exists to discredit the very wisdom that our intuition provides for us, that our capacity to recognize patterns provides for us. Being able to recognize patterns means that you don't have to make a list of all the things that Charlie Kirk said to know that he's racist. You don't need to prove to racist people that Charlie Kirk is racist, right? Because what does that really get you? Do you really think that by proving to people that Charlie Kirk is racist is going to change their mind about something? Do you really think that by showing people the evidence and the list of all the things that Charlie Kirk said, that that is somehow going to make them be like, you're right. He's so racist. How did I not know that? Oh, no. I shared this in a series of videos on my Instagram yesterday. And I was talking about how, like, so many liberal people, so many people who identify as progressives or being on the left, that the bonding behavior of liberals and progressives is to spend all of their time pointing out the hypocrisy of the right. And then it's like, do you really think that by pointing out the hypocrisy that they're going to be like, you got me. I said that I loved Jesus, but in fact, I won't feed the poor. And Jesus said, feed the poor. So I better start feeding the poor. Like, no, that's not what's happening here. Particularly because of what Trump represents, the hypocrisy is the point. The hypocrisy and the discrepancy is the point. The freedom to say one thing and do another is the point, right? The freedom to be openly racist and not apologize for the contradictions in one's humanity is the bonding behavior of the right. So this idea that we have to keep amplifying and repeating and proving, no, Charlie Kirk was really, everybody knows Charlie Kirk is racist. What is that doing for you? When the Nine of Pentacles says, hey, you've got enough information, part of what it's saying here, and I think this is really important for somebody to hear, you can act on the truth that you have arrived at by your own intuition, by your own recognition of a pattern, without needing other people to agree or believe you. Three of Cups and Knight of Pentacles. So I think the Three of Cups is especially interesting here because a lot of what's been on my mind the past couple of days is bonding behaviors and how there are all of these ways that humans as herd animals, humans who organize themselves into groups, humans that organize themselves around a common culture, that so much of that is not about an actual sincere belief. That's what 2020 taught us, that none of this is about what somebody sincerely believes. I think there is a very small group of people who sincerely believe in the tenets of white supremacy and racism and misogyny and patriarchy and transphobia and homophobia. There's a very small percentage of people, I think, who sincerely believe that. Almost everybody is performing the belief in those things in order to avoid alienation, right? They're performing the sincere belief in these things in order to signal to a group that they perceive to have power that, hey, I'm not a threat to your power. You want to know who is the most afraid of white people? It is not Black people. It is not Native Americans or indigenous people. White people are the most afraid of white people. White people are terrified of signaling in any way that they are a threat to whiteness. And white people envy Black people because we don't actually give a F. Some of us. Because I think there's a whole cohort of Black people right now who do not know that they are Black. And they think that their performance of conservative Christianity somehow magically transforms them into a skin color that white people will not find offensive or find a threat. Right? So this Three of Cups for me, I think, is just reinforcing this thought and line of thinking that I've been having the past few days, that people are making clear where their loyalty is, not because of sincere belief, but because it is bonding behavior. Being an open hypocrite without shame is the bonding behavior of the right. And I think part of the way out of this is like, do you need the right to agree with you about how you perceive and experience them? Do you need a racist person to agree with you that you see and experience them as racist? Do you need a transphobic person to agree with you in your assessment that they are transphobic? Do you need them to agree for you to behave and act in acceptance and acknowledgement of that fact? What about in your personal life? As you are relating with coworkers, friends, and family, and loved ones, and bosses? Do you think that if you pile up the receipts and you lay them before them, organize them in a spreadsheet, and then you say, look, see, you've treated me as all of these ways, and because you've treated me all of these ways, it makes you XYZ. I think that there's a function of that that is for our own sanity and for our own will and capacity to hold on to ourselves, our belief, and our experience, right? But there's another part of that that is this type of approval seeking. For those of you who have a conscience, for those of you who believe in empathy, for those of you who have a desire to see the world as it is, I think this is a real moment where our alliances shift. Another thing that I've been thinking about, particularly in light of this Three of Cups, is that Jupiter spent up until I think like half the year in Taurus. And so that means that like anybody who was basically born before like not born, yes, anyone who was born before like May 14th has Jupiter in Taurus in their solar return chart. And it's always fascinating to me to see how, in this instance, even though Jupiter's no longer in Taurus, I can still see the ripple effects of it. And some of this is because I've talked about this before. The birth chart of the president at any given time is a very accurate indicator, not only of what his presidency is going to be like, but actually what America is going to look like at that time. And Donald Trump has Sun in Taurus, and I believe South Node in Taurus as well. So much of what Donald Trump does is that he just wants to belong. He wants to be liked. He wants to be accepted. And also, he's an addict. That's why he hoards money, right? But he wants to be accepted and he wants to belong. And the narratives that are even emerging about Charlie Kirk's murder have to do with loyalties in these groups and signaling like, hey, I'm one of you. Hey, accept me. Hey, I belong. We've got the Knight of Pentacles here. And the Knight of Pentacles is a card that is about diligence. It is about devotion. It is about staying the course. It is about honoring time as an irrevocable aspect of building anything, of sustaining and maintaining anything. The Knight of Pentacles is a card that when I see it come up in client readings, it's saying don't change course. It's saying that even though you don't see the results yet, don't change course. Don't quit the job. Don't break up. Don't move. Don't start from scratch. Don't throw all of that stuff away, right? It's about building on what has already been established in a way that requires devotion. Devotion is one of my favorite words that is not used enough. I think devotion is process oriented rather than goal oriented. I think devotion is a show of our care, our value, right? What do we care about and what do we value? Proving and disproving suspicions has some real, like, mundane expressions at this eclipse. People are showing you who they are. People are showing you that your approval, your acceptance doesn't mean anything to them. That's something else that I talked about on a post up on my Instagram this past weekend. When you spend all of your time trying to point out someone else's hypocrisy, it's operating under the assumption that they should care what you think or that they do value your approval or acceptance in some capacity. What is it that makes you think that supporters of Charlie Kirk value your approval, value your acceptance? Or if we take it out of that context, what makes you think that someone who has repeatedly harmed you values your approval and acceptance? Because of the two pentacles here, the nine of pentacles and the knight of pentacles, I really think there's something here about what we do with our resources of time, our resources of money, right? It's making me think about Target, right? Target doesn't care what we think of them. Target does not value our approval and acceptance. Because if they did, they would have changed their behavior a long time ago. Who in your life are you still waiting for them to change their behavior? And why do you think that they value your approval and your acceptance? Some of this is, Venus is in Leo right now. It just entered Leo over the weekend. And I think that's some of what the undercurrent of these cards and the thoughts that I've been having about are about. I wrote in the 2025 guide, attracting or being attracted to respect. Go back 2 episodes ago and listen to the reading for the new moon in sidereal Leo, which was planting seeds of self-respect. Right? I think that's a lot of what's under these cards here, that people have chosen their alliances. The last thing that I want to say is that on the flip side of all of this, there are people who have proven their love to you. There are people who have proven their devotion to you. There are people who actually value your approval and value your acceptance, and they care how you see them. There are people who trust you. And in these moments, Virgo makes us so hypersensitive to discrepancies that we can become critical, we can become overly focused on pointing out the discrepancies, that we miss the bigger pattern of what we've experienced with people. We miss the bigger picture of what emerges when we look at the pattern of experiences that we've had with people. And so I will leave you all today with this thought: whose love, whose care, whose devotion, whose respect, whose commitment to truth in your life has it been very, very hard to accept? And what does it mean to accept that truth? What does it mean to really sit with the fact that, like, nah, this person has shown you over and over again? And how does your behavior or your relationship with that person change when you accept that truth? Thank you all for tuning in today. I am Dayna Lynn Nuckolls, also known as the People's Oracle. I will see you in 2 weeks at the new moon. No, it's going to be a full moon in sidereal Pisces. In the meantime, in between time, we are still currently at the peak of a current COVID surge. When we talk about data and evidence and being lied to, we are increasingly in a complete COVID data blackout. That means that there are no external metrics from institutions we can trust that can tell us how much COVID is in the wastewater, how many people are in the ER with COVID, how many people have died of COVID. This has been happening over the past several years where we've increasingly had less and less access to data we can trust. I am someone who never really trusted the data because really at the beginning, we didn't even have any test, right? So as the People's Oracle, remember I just talked about in this episode about how like that's been aspirational for me to become and live into the People's Oracle. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I can use my tools of divination and oracles to figure out when there is going to be COVID. And for those of you who know, I don't have to explain because that's why you're here, right? Or you've been here and witnessed for quite some time that when Dayna says there's going to be a COVID surge, there is a COVID surge. And when Dayna says there will not be a COVID surge, there is not a COVID surge, right? So we are in a COVID surge, and I don't know how much this one is going to recede. If you are a person who is delaying travel plans or receiving health care, I think that maybe mid to late October, early November, maybe will be the lowest lull. I don't know how much COVID is going to recede between now and then because I do anticipate another COVID surge from November peaking in January. So it just might be one of those plateaus. After January 2026, especially into February and March and the spring of 2026, I anticipate that we will have another incredible lull of COVID that is lowering the baseline of COVID that's generally circulating. And that will carry us for quite some time in 2026. I think that, even if you look at the wastewater data from the past several years, 2022 was really 2021, 2022, maybe 2023 was like the worst of the COVID in terms of if we're looking at wastewater data and deaths. So, in the meantime, all that means is you need to be masking in indoor spaces. If somebody is coughing and sneezing around you, especially if you live in California, there is a very high likelihood that that person actually has COVID. If somebody tells you their allergies are bothering them or they have a cold or the flu is not circulating right now, right? The viruses that cause colds are not circulating right now. COVID is circulating right now. So mask up in indoor spaces and anywhere where ventilation is questionable. Please, if you have any symptoms like a runny nose, achy ears, fever, fatigue, congestion, sore throat, loss of smell, lightheadedness, dizziness, brain fog, please just mask up for the sake of protecting others. You all take care of yourselves now. Bye.